have fun. Well, that's good.
That's awesome. Here we go. 100.1 FM, AM 1020 KDK. This is Car Stars and everything in between. He's the star, Richard Bazzi from Schultz Ford, schultzford.com. I am Bubba from 100.7 Star. And let me tell you, this is the biggest star we have ever had in the history of Car Stars and everything in between. global superstar, worldwide. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Car Stars and everything in between, the one and only Chip Skylark.
When I'm feeling lonely.
Okay, you stole my thunder. I'm killing you.
This is the best. Chris Kirkpatrick, welcome to Car Stars and everything in between. I've got kids. I had to start with that. I knew you'd get a kick out of that because that was my favorite cartoon that I was forced to watch as a parent, that I absolutely loved as a parent.
I like how you throw that in there. That's my favorite cartoon that I was forced to watch. Like, it's like,
but I loved. I was forced to watch it as a parent, but I actually loved watching it.
Right. I tried to find those. I got a 6-year-old. I try to find those too, where it's like any cartoon or any show you get, and it's like you can swallow it. You're like, hey, what about that show? Don't you like that show a ton? Let me buy you some shirts. Let me get that show all up in your stuff so we can both watch it.
Yes.
Well, I don't share that. I think I'm a generation ahead of you both.
It's awesome.
So I don't know those references. My kids were watching Captain Kangaroo, I think.
That's what I was watching.
Yeah, me too.
Mr. Rogers.
Mr. Rogers, yeah. Bubba, Chris has such a connection to the city. We talked about it just a little bit before you joined us. Chris, can you tell us a little bit about your connection to the city of Pittsburgh?
So I was born in Clarion, Pennsylvania, grew up in Old City, and wasn't until high school I moved to Ohio. But all my family, grandparents, uncles, aunts, all are in Clarion. And, you know, born and raised in Clarion and Old City, it's like I had no choice. We were talking about the Steelers there for a minute, and I was like, man, you didn't have a choice who your team was. I was like, I could be born in downtown Boston and be a Chargers fan, but, you know, Pittsburgh, we did like the old hold the baby up over the rocks and then ask if the first words are either yins or clam chowder. And you got dropped.
I love everything. Who is your favorite Steeler? If you could meet one Steeler, who would it be?
Not even a question. And I've already met him. There's so many, but number one on my list has always been number 88, Lynn Swan.
Oh yeah. My.
Oh, yeah.
And you met Lynn?
Yeah, when I was a kid, I remember the police used to bring around those like football cards and hand them out, but they were like the big, weird looking. They weren't real football cards. They were like paper football cards. And I just would always chase down cops trying to get Lynn Swan. You know, those years were when I was growing up. And, you know, as a kid growing up in that town, when the Steelers were winning 4 out of 6 Super Bowls was a big deal.
Chris, I don't want to dwell and have, you know, and ruminate over the past. You know, everybody has a past. Yours in particular caught me. You've come through an awful lot. To go from that to where you are now and today, I mean, can you tell me and tell us a little bit about what you think created that? How'd you do that? I mean, you know, you had a very, very difficult upbringing, and I hope I'm not stepping out of line saying that, but it's impressive to me to see how you have just grown and become the guy you are today.
I think the biggest part is the learning curve on how to figure out how to be, like, how to have money, how to act around people that, you know, you didn't grow up around. You know, I grew up in trailers and, you know, for a little while in a suburban and cabin up on this hill, you know, with outhouses. You know, it was growing up around, I didn't know anything different. So it was just my everyday. You know, I always see these stuff where it's like, you want to feel sorry for people or whatever it is. It's like, you don't have to feel sorry because we don't know any different. You know, it's just the way it is. It's the way you live. And so, you know, I think the hardest part was actually when the fame started to come in and we started to tour and people started to recognize me or the band or whatever it was that moment of, how do I fit into this equation? Like, I don't really belong in this. I belong somewhere else. I belong, the blue collar with my grandparents and my family working at the glass plant or whatever it is. It's not really something that can overnight get used to. So it was a long process of realizing that, no matter what I came from, I can deserve this as well. So figuring that all out and going through life that way, I think that was more of the difficult part than getting there, because my work ethic and wanting to succeed was always there. I always wanted to strive to be the best or strive to be great at what I did. And it was a lot easier coming from there because, there was basically no pressure. It was like, if I grew up in a trailer and I end up in a trailer, well, hey, it was meant to be.
Wow.
If I grew up in a trailer and end up in a house, that's just icing on the cake.
Do you remember the very first time you went to buy something and you weren't afraid if your like debit card would be declined?
That still doesn't happen. Are you kidding me? I'm still out there watch the way my family spends. I'm like, I don't even know if we need to supersize that McDonald's or not. It could be pushing us over the limit here this month. But yeah, I mean, I think I don't remember the first time. I just remember that feeling of security and and especially having my family still, going back with them and making sure they're always taken care of is important.
Oh yeah.
And that's how you seem to me. And as I read and I watched the documentary about Lou Pearlman last night, and I'll touch on that a little bit. But to see how you've just grown into the person you are, and I wonder when you talk about your childhood.
Fat in the documentary?
I'm sorry?
I was fat in the documentary. I get it.
Okay, well, hey, listen. I didn't want to say it, Chris, but
that's all right. That's XL. We call him Chris XL.
Well, hey, listen, I just lost about 70 pounds, so I get it.
And I just lost about 35 pounds, so I get it too.
So,
there we go.
So, but it doesn't seem to matter. Your personality shines through all of it. And the one thing, see, I'm going to jump all over the place because I do have a sheet of questions I want to ask you, but I'm going to jump all over the place. And, well, first of all, what kind of car do you drive?
I've got me a Dodge Rebel truck.
Okay. Well, we're going to change that, but we'll do that another time. We'll do that another time.
I like my truck. I mean, it's a 2019. I went to get a new one and I was like, man, they're not doing anything new on these things.
That's because you haven't entered a Ford. We'll talk about that. I don't want to make this I don't want this to be about me. We'll make it about you. But when you talk about growing up and, your childhood and all that, it's interesting to me that it seems like you always wanted to sing and music has always been in your family. Mm-hmm. Is that right? You've always wanted to sing.
My grandpa was a local musician around the Western Pennsylvania area. His name was Jim Eustace. He used to perform a lot. My grandma was always singing in church. It was almost a prerequisite in our family that was like, test them out, throw them out in church, see how they do, and if they're good, then they can raise up the ranks of the family or whatever. But no, we're very, very, musical.
Very musical.
Family.
Yeah.
My uncle and aunt, both in the Pittsburgh area, still perform a lot. So.
Oh wow,
that's really great.
By the way, if you're just tuning in, this is Chris Kirkpatrick. Obviously, you know him from NSYNC. When we come back, we're going to talk about the podcast. We're going to talk about the tour. We're going to talk about 70 million albums sold, what we're doing, and how you can see and hear him when he's on tour. This is Cars, Stars, and Everything in Between. More with Chris Kirkpatrick when we return.
Now we're still live, but so it's okay because I'm going to tell you, Chris, you're so impressive.
You're
amazing. Sorry, man. I'll start talking, and you got to give me the hook.
No, because I can do the same thing with you. It doesn't happen all the time, but you would know that because you have your own podcast.
Yeah.
And sometimes it just clicks, and sometimes you're searching, and sometimes when it just clicks, it just goes. And I feel like with you, it can just go. The one interesting thing, Bubba, are we back?
Well, not yet. I'm just saving this first break. I'll let you. I'll give you the intro coming in.
And we can repeat this, but one of the most interesting things that I found, because you're certainly a lot younger than me, but you sang doo-wop, and that's that's generational, and that's not your generation.
You ready to come back?
Yeah.
All right, here we go. 100.1 FM, AM 1020 KDKA. This is Cars, Stars, and Everything in Between. He's the star Richard Bazzi from Schultz Ford at schultzford.com. Bubba from 100.7 Star. And our star with us today is Chris Kirkpatrick from NSYNC. But I want to get a couple things out of the way right away. So you've got this podcast that you've got going on called Name Drop with Brian McFadden from MTV, which is the second season, began this past May. Is that correct?
Yep. We just finished our second season. We're about to record the third season in 2 weeks.
And then you've got the Pop 2000s tour with BB Mac, Ryan Cabrera, LFO in O-Town, which is obviously going amazing as well.
Yeah, and that's been a lot of fun. You know, we've got to play some great places around Pittsburgh, around Western PA, around Eastern PA, you know, all over, where it's like this just like a throwback kind of tour. You know, I come out and do a bunch of NSYNC songs. LFO does their songs, O-Town, BB Mac. We've had Smash Mouth. We've had who else have we had? Man, we've had a lot of old school like people. That's been good.
Have you ever performed on stage with another Pittsburgh guy, Bret Michaels?
Are you kidding me? That's my boy. I love me some Bret Michaels, dude. He's got the best Windsor accent when he gets into it too.
Bret Michaels and I became friends last year. I was able to go on stage at his show and sing with him to close the show.
You had a good time, didn't you?
No, we did Sweet Home Alabama.
What? Oh, normally it's nothing but a good time.
Let's go.
Yeah, no, Bret, let me tell you too, Bret was one of those guys that we bonded over the Yinzer thing. Like, he came to our show about 25 years ago back in the day. And then we reconnected maybe about 6 years ago. And one of the nicest human beings I think I've ever met.
On earth.
Not even just in the business. I mean, as people go, that guy is above and beyond.
The best of the best of the best. Everybody should be able to spend 2 minutes with Bret Michaels, and you as well, because you're the same way.
Yeah, but
he sure seems to be.
2 minutes with Bret, that'll change your life for sure.
Wow, that's a great statement. That's crazy.
Yeah, that's a big thing for Bret. I mean, it really is. Like, that dude, I could sit here and talk the rest of the time about it, because one of my first shows back in the 80s was Poison and Tesla that I went to on my own. And, you know, watching him back then and knowing he's one of those rock gods, it's like crazy to see that he's just, you know, he's a Yinzer. He's just a nice, down home guy. It's great.
Yeah, we got to keep talking about you throughout our broadcasting, Bubba, because Chris, you're an amazing guy. And I'm going to blame it on Pittsburgh now. That's why you're such an amazing guy.
Well, let's give Clarion some credit there.
Yeah, Clarion. Yeah, Clarion. We're going to give Clarion.
Kurt Angle went to Clarion.
Yep, Kurt Angle. Right. I just ran into him at Troy Polamalu's flag football game maybe a month or two ago.
Absolutely.
So did you play?
Yeah, I did, and I didn't get hurt. And then I play in a softball game a week later and broke my right hand. It was horrible.
Oh my God. So that athleticism and your grit, your Pittsburgh grit, was one of the attractive things, because I know that Snoop Dogg and what's his name went on and they called you out by name.
Oh, Eminem?
Eminem years ago.
Yeah, I can't spell Eminem. But he called you out, and they said they called you out specifically because you're the only one that had the balls to stand up to it. And so I said, oh, I gotta love that guy.
Well, you know, too, it's funny because I'm a big Eminem fan. In fact, the two greatest things that have happened in the last 2 weeks are, you know, our song being in the new Deadpool movie.
Yes.
And then Eminem coming out with a new record that I, love. So, you know, those two things, I think even on the tour, the guys are like, man, Chris seems a little angry. We need to let him stop listening to Eminem so much.
Isn't it amazing the fact that your song is in the Deadpool movie, which is like the #1 smash hit movie in the world right now?
And let me tell you, we went to the premiere last week and, you know, hanging out with some of those people and being around. But hold on. I've totally forgot about this. And I hate to say this, but we're at the Deadpool after party and I lost my mind. You know, the Impractical Jokers were there, which are great guys. They're all awesome. And I'm standing there talking with my guys at this big after party. Ryan's there, Blake Lively's there, all these people are there. And this dude walks by, and my mouth dropped, and I chased him down to the bar. And my buddies were like, "Oh, dude, that must be some kind of football player or something." You know, Chris always goes after the sports guys. And I go over to the bar, and I tapped him on the shoulder, and I'm like, "I'm going to be ballsy right now." And I'm like, "Excuse me, Cam, my name's Chris. I'm from Pittsburgh, whatever." It was Cam Hayward.
Let's go.
So Cam was the one that I totally fangirled out of at the Deadpool premiere, besides from Ryan and them. But
I do have to tell you real quick to add backward, to rewind to the Bret Michaels story. When I was on stage singing with Bret Michaels, the Impractical Jokers were also on stage with me singing with Bret Michaels.
that's awesome. That is awesome.
The best.
Full circle. Full
Let's
circle.
go.
We did it.
They're funny guys. They're really funny guys. And Chris, you actually started NSYNC,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
How did you do that?
When I moved to Orlando, I was always doing like quartets and a cappella stuff. So everywhere I went, when I started college at a community college, Valencia in Orlando, I was in choir, and I started putting together a quartet. And we would go around and sing at coffee shops or at whatever it was. And I just always loved, because like we were talking about earlier, doing the doo-wop, I always loved the 4 or 5 part harmony stuff. And I would arrange it, we'd perform it, and I just loved doing it. So I kept having these bands, and in having these bands, I got to meet Lou Pearlman. And once I met Lou Pearlman, and Lou Pearlman was like, "Well, listen, I just started this band called the Backstreet Boys, and there's Coke. Why can't there be Pepsi? There's McDonald's. Why can't there be Burger King?" So, you know, he helped me put together the band. Well, I mean, I put together the band. He put the money behind the band, and which I didn't have at the time. So, you know, that's how it all started. And once we had me, Justin, JC, and then we got Joey in the band, we signed a record deal. And then a few years later, I think we got Lance in the band and signed him in.
I was today years old when I found out what NSYNC stood for. What is
That's so crazy. I can't. Well, the funny part about it is I think it's because Lance was in the band, like I said, afterwards, after we'd already signed the deal as NSYNC. We had this bass in our band named Jason. So it was Justin, Chris, Joey, Jason, and JC. And if you write those names out, the last letter of all of our first names spells NSYNC. So that's how we got the name.
I did not know that.
Yep, I was today years old when I found that out. Isn't that crazy?
Wow.
When Jason was out of the band, we needed an N, and we ended up getting Lance, so we started calling him Lanston as a joke.
That's pretty funny. I watched, like I said, I watched the Pearlman documentary. I'm assuming you've seen it. And
Yep.
How close to accurate is it? Is it 100% accurate?
Yeah, it's a documentary. You know, you're going to get some hit or misses here. I think there was a lot of stuff in the early. There were some time frames that were a little jumbled. You know, I know that it seemed like Backstreet had already blown up in the States and were huge by the time we started, which, you know, wasn't really true. It was like we started right after them. I mean, they were in Europe and we followed them into Europe, and we could tell in Europe they'd already been there for about 6 to 8 months. So they had the leg up on us there. And, you know, when they came to the States, they dropped about the same, probably about 4 to 6 months before we dropped the record. But, you know, it was definitely not years and not a big gap between us.
Right. When I listen to your songs and I listen to your music, I mean, it's beautiful. There's songs that are just great. And when you take the label boy band away, you're left with just great talent, amazing talent. All of you had it. And when I hear you sing a cappella, it sends shivers down my spine, because the guys are just great. And man, I know that Lou said, boy bands will always be in demand as long as God keeps making little girls. Mm-hmm. And I wondered about that, because what do you think really ended that era?
Well, it's like all the eras, you know, it'll come back, and it's cyclical. You know, you had the new kids for a while, and then once the new kids get to that stratosphere type, you know, place, it's like there's a backlash against it, and then suddenly nobody wants to hear that. And look at Bret and 80s rock. You know, 80s rock had that. 80s rock was on top everywhere. You know, it was the thing. Motley Crue, Def Leppard, Poison, all these bands were on top of the world. And then grunge came in, and there was a backlash towards all that, you know, pretty boy music. It was like, you can be ugly and wear a flannel shirt and not care about putting makeup or hairspray on or whatever it is and make music. And then, you know, grunge ran its course. And then there was this new thing with Korn and Limp Bizkit and this poppier side, the Blink 182s, who were like kind of punk rockish. And then that ran its course. So, you know, we had our time, and us and Backstreet, 98 Degrees, got to a point where it was like people were like, oh, we're kind of tired of this now, you know. And I remember 2002, 2003, 2004, it was tough for me to go out because, you know, it's like, oh, there's that dude from that band that sucks, you know. And it was like, all right, well, whatever you think, you know. We still made a lot of records. And then some time went by, and then the One Directions came back, and the bands come back again. And then they had their course, and then there was a time again, now the BTSs and all these bands, and then those have their course. And it's just so cyclical that I think that it had run its course. People still appreciated what we did. And now getting the respect and going back and going, they realize that we're kind of grunge now. We're not those good looking guys that are going to steal their girlfriends. We're old guys, you know, that aren't selling bed sheets anymore. It's like we're selling songs, not our faces. So they see that, and there's not that much to be threatened about, and they can kind of like us again.
Wow.
Yeah, well,
Unbelievable.
we love you.
Yeah,
We
you're
love you.
amazing. And don't forget, everybody needs to make sure they listen to Name Drop with you and Brian McFadden. You can follow that on YouTube. And of course, the Pop 2000s tour with BB Mac, Ryan Cabrera, LFO, and O-Town, and yourself. And Pittsburgh is so lucky and proud to, even though you're a little north of here originally,
Really
but
so.
we're proud to say that you're from here. And you're just, as the way you speak about Bret Michaels is the way we speak about you, because you are truly unbelievable, Chris Kirkpatrick.
Well, I appreciate that. That means the world, because he's a legend.
Chris, is there one thing in parting, is there one thing you would say to aspiring artists, aspiring young artists, to pursue their dreams? Is there one thing you would leave with them?
It's hard to say stuff that's not really that cliche, but, you know, definitely use your nose as fuel. You know, when you hear no, you know, that's fuel to, you know, work even harder, because, you know, I can tell you, I've lived and grown up on a mountain of no's, and those are what really make you get that one yes, or get that foot in the door, or work even harder. Because if somebody tells you you're great and somebody tells you you're awesome your whole life, you're going to sit back on your laurels and not be great. Where if somebody tells you, you know, you're not good, or, you know, you're not good at anything, or you'll never amount to anything, it just makes you work even harder and strive, and know your abilities, know your power, know that you have the internet and all these things at your fingertips now, that if you're a talented musician, or you push your music, or you push your songs, or you push your ideas, somebody's going to see them.
Chris
Man, that's
Kirkpatrick,
great.
thank you for being on Cars, Stars, and Everything in Between.